This is the Outback QB Daily. I'm Curtis DeBoy. I've got special guests Matt Maidman and Chris Hall. We're talking OCs, DCs, head coaches, the top 5 in each. Let's get into it. Welcome, lads. Doss is enjoying the In-Betweeners style theme song.
I am.
You like it? Bit of pop punk for you, mate. All right. Now,
it's almost sort of Blink 182.
it is, yes. I just looked up pop punk in the royalty-free database, and that's what came up, and I quite liked it. Yeah. Now, for those of you who are listening who aren't familiar with these two, this is the other two parts of the...
Flat if they weren't.
So, well, this is the first time you're on the Outback QB Daily podcast, right?
That's a good point.
So I often mention, as I have in the few episodes so far, we have the main flagship show, the Outback Quarterback podcast. So look that up if you're not familiar with it. And Hally and Doss, the two men in the room with me right now, they are my co-hosts on that show.
So you've been releasing Outback Daily shows?
This is a pre-record, Chris.
Ah, yes. I thought this might be for the next couple of days.
I knew where you were going, Kurt, but yeah.
All right, let's completely pull back the curtain, shall we? So...
I thought this was going up on like Wednesday or something.
No, this will be released a few weeks after we've actually recorded it.
Ah, gotcha.
As we record it right now, I've not released any Outback QB Daily shows. However, by the time this gets released, there will have been a few ahead of it. Anyway, that's the magic reveal. And you can expect a lot of this professionalism on the Outback QB main show. So if you haven't followed us there,
lack of
please
leadership,
do.
isn't it, Doss?
Right, this is the last time you're covered on this show. I'm making this myself again. We're going to talk very quickly, the last little 10-minute snappy shows, boys. Doss, I'm looking at you. Top 5 head coaches, defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators. Now, there's a
I've
bit
allowed 15 minutes for defensive coordinators.
3 minutes
For
each.
each one.
3 minutes for... Nah. We'll be
I got 7 words on each head coach.
I love that. It's a haiku for each one. Doss, we talked a bit about the science and who I've allocated here. And I said, you got the defensive coordinators, which you weren't happy about, but then you realised it was a compliment because it's our acknowledgement that you know a lot about this stuff, right? Hally and I'm not sure of our defensive scheme knowledge.
Anything can be Googled, Curtis.
Anything can be Googled, including Joke of the Week, which you can hear on every Outback QB main show.
Watch him take Joke of the Week to Outback Daily. He'll start his own Joke of the Week.
Joke of the day.
Joke of the day.
It just becomes a comedy podcast of me trying to replicate your segment. So where do we want to start? Let's leave head coaches to the end.
Good idea.
Good.
I'll have a couple M&Ms.
We'll start with DCs. Doss, why don't you kick us off? So top 5 quickly.
Well, before I do the top 5,
Here we go.
I wanted to make a note. Well, there's...
No, please.
What we need to allude to is there are quite a few head coaches that also call plays on offense and defense. So we're looking at it, from that perspective. Now, there was 3 quite very good defensive coordinators last season who got head coaching jobs in the offseason. Mike McDonald, who was the DC at Baltimore, is now head coach of Seattle. I thought completely transformed the Ravens defense last year. Dan Quinn with Dallas, now head coach at Washington, and Raheem Morris, who did a great job with the Rams on defense, is now the head coach in Atlanta. So would you want me to go from number 1?
No, go from 5 to 1. Let's do it up to the best.
All right, 5, I've got Brian Flores, Minnesota Vikings. It didn't inherit a great defense in Minnesota, fellas, considering the talent that he had. But what he does do is he blitzes more than any other team in the league. He took over after the 2022 season, so his first full season. The Vikings were 28th in the league for points allowed in 2022. Last season, they were 13th. Very good, Brian Flores.
Aggressive. Very aggressive approach.
Yeah. Number 4, Aaron Glenn.
Yes,
Detroit Lions. And the Lions run defense took a big step forward in 2023. Third season. He took them from 30th to 3rd.
That's the run defense.
Run defense. Yeah. Pass defense is, we had Cam Sutton and a few other issues on the part, which they've addressed in the offseason. So,
which you're conveniently ignoring in your notes.
Yeah, that's right. So, look, but when we talk about head coaching roles, Aaron Glenn, he interviewed for 4 roles in last offseason. So he is didn't get one, obviously, but he is well regarded, and they've addressed their pass defense with some of the additions, Carlton Davis, Terry Arnold, and Brian Branch, who's year 2 at safety, who we love, Kurt.
Yep.
Number 3, Jeff Ulbrich, New York Jets.
They've been flying defensively the last couple of years.
And they've drafted very well on defense with Sauce Gardner and Jermaine Johnson. And free agency, they've picked up DJ Reed and Quincy Williams over that period. And they've been the third most efficient defense the last 2 seasons as well.
Ever since Sauce joined.
Yes. Well, there you go. So, but he's done a very good job there. Robert Saleh does orchestrate a lot of the defense, but Jeff Ulbrich does a very nice job. Number 2, I've got Jim Schwartz, Cleveland Browns.
Yes, I like that.
DC. I knew you would. That he won the NFL's Coordinator of the Year award last year. Very successful with the Eagles as their defensive coordinator before. Was Super Bowl winning team, and the Browns, well, they were ranked first in defensive efficiency last season. Jim Schwartz was a big part of that. Be interested to see how he goes this season as well. I think the Browns are in good stead. And number one, Spags. Steve Spagnuolo.
It was one answer and one answer only.
Kansas City. The Chiefs wouldn't have won their 3rd Super Bowl in 5 years if it wasn't for the defensive mind of Steve Spagnuolo. Those crazy defensive blitzes on the fly, which we saw in the playoffs, does help having Chris Jones as your defensive tackle. Probably now the best at his position in the league. And just the clever use of his corners that integrate so well into the secondary. And we've looked at the players. I mean, lost L'Jarius Sneed, but I guarantee you they'll find someone else that will step up and fill a role. And they've drafted very well.
They have.
That also
Duffy,
fit.
Karlaftis, they've come on.
But they also fit the Spagnuolo scheme. And that's important. Drafting is one, but having them fit into that defensive scheme for the DC is a big important piece. So they've done very well.
Very good. Now, one extra little name just to chuck in there. Mike Zimmer is now the Dallas Cowboys DC, the ex-Minnesota Vikings
coach. Out of college. Back out of college, I should say.
Interesting one. Interesting to see how that goes. Well, yeah. It's an up and down defense in Dallas. They got some stars who make some plays but can be a bit undisciplined and let their guys go. So
they do. The other one I didn't mention, Vic Fangio, the godfather of defense, now in Philly. He didn't have a great season with Miami. Miami were okay last season on defense, but they just lost too many players towards the end of the season. He didn't really want to be there. I think he is now in the position where he wanted to be. I think he wanted to be in Philadelphia last season.
They brought him in as a consultant in the playoffs, didn't they?
Yeah. So I think Vic Fangio, very unlucky, but I think he's still got plenty to offer.
Now, and I'm doing OCs, offensive coordinators, and Hawley, there is an incredible stat with OCs. There is only one offensive coordinator who has been at his team for longer than 2 years.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
2 years. And he's also a head coach. He's the only guy at the moment who's both head coach and offensive coordinator, and it's in the NFC West. It's a red team.
Just tell me.
And his first name, Kyle
K.
S.
Shanahan.
No, that's too obvious. Let's say K. Shanahan. Yeah. So he's the only one that's been there for longer than 2 years, and I'm not even counting him because he's a head coach. So we'll take him out. The turnover is unbelievable. 15 out of 32 teams have new OCs this year. That's almost half the league. So I consider Shanahan the best OC, but he's out of the race for that. So I've got a couple of honourable mentions very quickly. Brian Schottenheimer for Dallas. Now, Dos, I'm not sure what you'd think, but he's a veteran OC of the Jets and the Rams in the thousands and early tens. He inherited a functional offense last year, but he did take it to the next step, and they even scored 32 points when they played badly in that playoff loss that we've got on the screen right now, Dos.
Yeah, so they got junk time points. Let's be fair.
But can rack up the points, so that's at least a consideration.
I wouldn't have. Oh, you got him honourable though. Yeah, probably.
Got him honourable. And this one, now, I can't put him in my 5 because he got sacked, but I think he was a bit of a scapegoat, and that is Ken Dorsey, who was at Buffalo, now at Cleveland. He was fired halfway through last year because Josh Allen just couldn't stop turning the ball over, so he's got to be responsible for that a bit, Dorsey. But he had them humming the year before. Yes, it was off the back of Dave
They did
Bowles'
play better
work.
though when he was out, and they started giving James Cook the ball.
I know. But I think his body of work, he's done some good stuff. So I do have him in my mind as a guy who could work at Cleveland. But the number 5, now, Dos.
Yep.
Adam Stenavich, Green Bay. It's a name most won't know. He's very unheralded, but he did navigate the Rodgers departure. And last year we saw what he did with a team of absolute youngsters. They were a humming offense for portions of last year, and all of a sudden there's new hope. And if he does it again this year, then he's got himself a job in the NFL for years to come.
Yeah, it has done a very nice job. Probably gets, because Matt LaFleur looks after the offense, a lot of the play calling. So
sure,
probably
but we still need to acknowledge the OC.
He's probably not as regarded as what you're calling out, but I do like that. I wasn't expecting you to have him in there.
Well, I'm glad you like it. Number 4, another team on the rise, Bobby Slowick from Houston.
Yes.
1 year in the job, Slowick and head coach D'Amico Ryans, they showed a lot. And let's be honest, CJ Stroud was a massive part of that. But it doesn't work unless the guys at the top are doing their thing and switched on. That offense showed a lot of juice, so he deserves some credit. Number 3 is one of the great names in coaching.
Kellen Moore.
No, he's not on my list.
What?
Well, Chargers fell apart with him offensively.
Not his fault.
Sort of
Hawley
is.
loves Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore will be in Hawley's unofficial
Head coaches.
Honorable mention, even though he's not a coach. Jim Bob Cooter, Indianapolis.
Oh,
Now,
Colts.
He had an indifferent stint at Detroit a while ago, which did some reputational damage. But lately, he's done some very good stuff. In 2022, he was the passing game coordinator at Jacksonville. What year was Trevor Lawrence's best year by far? 2022. Last year, he stepped in as the OC at Indy, a year in which they lost Anthony Richardson early, had to survive with Gardner Minshew full-time, only had Jonathan Taylor for 10 games in the year, only had Michael Pittman as their number 1, so, good but not great, and nothing much behind Pittman, and basically no productive tight end. Kylan Granson was
Josh Downs, Alec Pierce.
Kylan Granson was their best tight end with 300 yards, and somehow they squeezed out a top 10 point per game average across the year. That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary with that group of players, particularly with what happened with Richardson. So Jim Bob Cooter, he deserves that. Number 2, again, some won't like this, but Greg Roman, LA Chargers. Now, he has his critics, but when the Baltimore offense was at its best with Lamar, Roman was the man.
He was out of a job last year.
He was out of a job. That's why it's controversial to put him at 2. But he's back. Jim Harbaugh knows his stuff, and he's brought him in. He loves to run the ball. Clearly likes what he sees from the Baltimore running backs in Dobbins and Edwards, because he's brought the whole room across to the Chargers. So let's see what happens. But I think it's a cool appointment, and I want to see what that offense
Watch
looks like.
J.K. Dobbins carve up this year for Hawley.
I hope so. Man.
Come on, JK.
I hope so. Come on, JK. And finally, number 1, Detroit, Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
Ben Johnson. This was a clear number 1 for me right from the start. He's been at Detroit since 2022, so compared to everyone else, he's an absolute veteran of 2 and a bit years. That was the year they acquired Jared Goff, and a year where they were pretty much roundly mocked for when the season started. Remember, people were mocking Detroit for getting Goff.
Yeah,
Goff
true.
was down and out. People thought he was a dud.
And
He fizzled out.
Stafford won the
Stafford
Super Bowl. And
exactly.
It was like, oh.
That year he won it. So it was Johnson who helped to turn all of that around. He's now a top 10 QB, Goff. Most teams could only dream of having a QB of his caliber. Plus, he turned the offense into one of the more feared attacks in the league. It was good drafting from GM Brad Holmes, of course. St. Brown and Laporta come to mind. But here's a clear stat in case you're in any doubt. In 2021, before Ben Johnson came to Detroit as OC, the Lions scored 19 points per game. 2022, he arrived, it's 26 per game. The year after, 27 per game. Head coach in waiting, best OC in the game.
Well, it was, they were flying. I'm trying to remember Washington. The Washington delegation was flying on their way to Detroit to get Ben Johnson, and halfway on the flight over, he's announced that, I'm staying with Detroit.
Yes.
Turn the plane around.
Have I just upset Dan Raybold again?
Oh, maybe.
A number 1 Washington fan.
I definitely think that he was Washington's number 1 head coach candidate last season.
All right, Hawley, head coaches. What's your top 5, mate? Round this out for us.
All right, my top 5 head coaches, starting at 5 was Kyle Shanahan, 55% win rate.
5 seems low.
5?
Okay. Keep going.
Okay.
Well, they're my
Hawley.
My rankings, aren't they? He turned Mr. Irrelevant into a top QB. Mm-hmm. He's been in 3 Super Bowls as a head coach, offensive coordinator, and his 3 losses have come 2 to Mahomes, 1 to Brady. So
that's tough.
I mean, yeah, what more can you do?
Well, you could win.
You can win.
2 NFC
There is a
championships.
bit more you could do, to be honest.
You could win. But he didn't. And Mahomes and Brady will go down as number 1 and number 2 GOAT.
Yeah.
In the history of the NFL. Okay, number 4, Sean McVay. 60% win rate, 7 seasons, 5 double-digit win seasons, the Super Bowl, and then obviously last year they were down and out. Everyone thought they're done, they're rebuilding, and he came out and led the boys to the postseason. So he's gained me as a fan, definitely, the last year or so.
Yeah, he's a jet. He's such a good coach.
My number 3, Dos, is Dan Campbell. Now
under pressure.
He's under pressure, but and this is why he's under pressure.
You've got Dan Campbell ahead of McVay and Shanahan.
I do, because he's taken Detroit 3-13, 9-8, 12-5.
That is very good.
That is a genuinely impressive statistic. That means this year he needs to go 15-3. Otherwise, he's under
15
pressure.
and-
15 and 2,
2,
15 and
maybe.
2 even. He
For
can't go
those of
15
you who are
and 3.
wondering why we're saying under pressure, a month or so ago, Hawley said that he was one of the most under pressure coaches in the league on our main show. It stirred up a lot of listeners to give strong feedback.
He's under pressure because he's coached so well.
There's a new expectation now in Detroit, yes.
There is.
Number 2?
Number 2, so...
Oh, no, I don't like the look of this smile.
I don't know how...
I can't believe you've... Yeah, anyway.
How controversial I should be to annoy Doss. And I'll do it just to annoy Doss. I'm going to go number 2, Andy Reid. So
What?
63.9% win rate, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 284 wins, 4th most all time.
I know who he's put number 1.
Yeah, you do.
He's put Bill Belichick number 1.
Oh, I haven't. He's not coaching it.
I thought you were going to...
Nah. AFC West 8 times running. He is a genuine star, Andy Reid. His last probably 5 years, I think he's been easily the best... up there with the best.
Well, 3 titles.
3 times best coaches in the
I
league.
don't-
But my number one,
I'm speechless.
my
at
number
the
one,
moment.
my number one coach in the league, 63.3% win rate, which is almost equal to Andy Reid, and he's had 17 non-losing seasons in a row.
Mike Tomlin.
Mike Tomlin is the best coach in the league. He led Pittsburgh to the playoffs last year with probably the worst quarterback room we've seen in a long time.
It's not crazy.
I mean, he calls the defense, and he's in charge of the defense. But go ahead.
Well, that's all I've got. 17 non-losing seasons in a row is almost just. How do you do that? If you said to me, you're going to have a coach, and you're not going to have a losing season for the next 17 years.
I'd ask you, how many Super Bowls did he win?
He's got one, and he lost to Green Bay, and the other one a couple years later. But that was early in his career as well. So that's what's setting him back a little bit. He's
four appearances in the 2 appearances in the Super Bowl in his first 4 seasons,
and then he hasn't quite got back since. But for me, with what he's been dealing with the last couple of years to still find success, especially last year was the one that cemented it for me because the quarterbacks he had were absolutely horrendous. That were terrible.
I like your top 5. I would just change the order of it.
Yeah,
I would probably have those 5 in a different order.
Don't mind it, Hawley. I would go Reid 1, Tomlin 2, just because of...
I do have Reid number 1 on my rankings.
Oh, you just changed it to annoy him.
I changed it because Doss was slowly getting more and more annoyed, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to annoy him a little bit more.
That's the perfect way to end. That's the Outback QB Daily for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, boys.
Bye, guys.